You're listening to the Big Three of B2B Leadership podcast with Mike Faherty, where world-class business leaders share their secrets for personal, organizational, and market growth. Gain powerful insights from industry leaders that have been tested by the fire.
Hello and welcome to the Big Three of B2B Leadership, where we invite industry leaders to share their insights on personal development and professional development, developing and maintaining operational excellence in an organization, and expanding your company's position in the marketplace. My name's Mike Faherty. I'm your host today. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Wendy Weiss. Wendy is the founder of Salesology. Salesology is a sales training and coaching consultancy for sales organizations as well as salespeople individually. She's known as the queen of cold calling, and I'm excited to talk to Wendy today about cold calling, business development, and all things sales. Welcome, Wendy. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mike.
Great. Hey, so when I was doing a little research and I was remembering kind of our past conversations, you mentioned something to me offhand, and I wanted to come back to it here. I hope you're okay with this, but you mentioned that you were a dancer in the past, and I just thought that was kind of interesting. Can you share a little bit about that time and how it prepared you for the world that you live in today?
Absolutely. I was, my company, Salesology, we're a sales training consultancy. I was never supposed to be a sales trainer. I was supposed to be a ballerina. And as a matter of fact, my first career was I danced with Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, and then I danced with the Cincinnati Ballet. And as you may know, ballet is one of the most difficult and exacting art forms. And I got into this field just completely by accident because in between my dance jobs, I needed a day job. And I got very tired of waiting on tables. So I got a job with a telemarketing agency that did business to business development. And they taught me this skill set. And learning this skill set was completely transformational because down the line, then it enabled me to build a business. And I do believe, and my prospecting model is based on everything I know in life and in business, I learned in ballet class. And I'm happy to share more of that as well, but it's the truth.
Well, that's awesome. What a cool story. I never really had a chance to be a ballerina, although I did take one dance class one time, and it was fun. But I think it was just because the girl in the class wanted to see if I could pick her up. I don't know, but that was about all there was to it. So can you talk about your background? Not so much necessarily in dance, although that we can go there if you'd like, but how you made that transition from being a telemarketing person and kind of picking up those skills as your day job while you're dancing in the evenings, and how that sort of led to where you are now with Salesology.
Sure. I got that day job. I actually only did it for a few months because then I got another dance job and I quit, which is what artists do. Right. And then down the line, I finished that job and I needed another day job, and I called up the agency and they didn't have any work for me. So I said to myself, well, gee, I know how to prospect. They taught me. So I got myself some clients. And for a number of years, I had clients that I represented, and I did business development for them. And it worked out very nicely. If I got a day job, a dance job, I would call up my clients and say, I'm leaving town. I'll call you when I get back. But eventually I had to have a hip replacement. So I wasn't going to be dancing anymore. And I said to myself, well, what else do I know how to do? And I said, well, I know how to do business development. And I actually sat down and wrote a book on business development. It was called Cold Calling for Women, Opening Doors and Closing Sales. It came out in 2000. And I launched my sales training program with that book. And so that was 22 years ago. I've been training salespeople ever since. And of course, things have really changed. And interestingly, it was one of my first clients, one of my business development clients, that dubbed me the queen of cold calling because I just found so many opportunities for him. So today we work with sales teams, train salespeople to find opportunities, build a pipeline faster, more easily, more profitably.
Yeah. So how would you say the industry in prospecting and business development has changed over those 22 years?
Well, one of the things that I think is very interesting, and you probably have your own thoughts about this, Mike, but I think that business development has always been sort of undervalued, and undervalued in different ways. I have been hearing since I launched, since I wrote Cold Calling for Women and started my business in 2000, I've been hearing that cold calling is dead. And they said it in 2000, they're still saying it today. And cold calling's not dead, it's changed. It doesn't work the way it used to. And it's always, business development is always changing and evolving. So in the year 2000, my clients, they'd give me a directory. They'd say, call these people. You know, today we have all sorts of great tools that are available to make things easier, faster. All the sales intelligence that's available online, all of the software that's available to make SDRs more efficient and more accountable. And so there are things that have changed and things that don't work anymore, new things that have come along. But the bottom line is that in order to sell something, it is likely that a salesperson has to speak with a prospect. And one of the best ways to do that is over the telephone.
I love that. I love that. It's fascinating because my next question was literally number 3. What do you say to people that claim cold calling is dead? So thanks for reading my mind, because that I was really interested in your take on that. It's I've been in this business just about as long, and I've been hearing that since day one. You just can't do it anymore. It doesn't make sense. People don't answer their phone. And to some degree, some of that is true, right? People answer the phone less than they did 20 years ago.
That is true.
That's certainly true. And I don't think anyone who's in this business of either teaching people how to prospect or prospecting for other companies, would try to claim that that's not true. What it's challenged us, I think, to your point, is just to be smarter about how we do it. Be smarter about who we call, be smarter about when we call, be smarter about how we call. And try to put as much of the advantage in our favor as we possibly can through using technology and intelligence, to still try to generate a meaningful sales conversation with the prospect. I agree with you 100%. It's like, you and I kind of read out of the same hymnal or sing out of the same hymnal, whatever the metaphor is. But that's absolutely true. I've been saying for years that before something is sold, someone has to have a conversation with someone, especially in the B2B sort of, high value solution space. No one's going to go online and click buy, for a $50,000 solution. They're just not going to do it. So someone's going to have a conversation, and we can either sit around and wait for those conversations to happen, or we can be proactive and try to create them, right?
Well, that's what I love about prospecting. You get to choose. Like, who do you want to do business with? Go introduce yourself. I mean, how powerful is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's empowering.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, so what do you see as the biggest challenge that B2B companies are facing today as it relates to growth? So everyone is looking for growth, and that's nothing new. Since business started, people have been looking for growth. But what do you see as the biggest challenge that these B2B companies are facing when trying to grow in today's climate?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that they're facing from a sales perspective is being able to handle leads appropriately. Because, there's always this controversy about cold leads versus warm leads.
Right.
But if you have a so-called warm lead and your SDR doesn't know how to handle it, it really doesn't matter how you generated that lead. And I said earlier that I believe everything I know in life and business, I learned in ballet class. Now, one of the things that I learned in ballet class, we teach a very simple 3-step method that's based on what I learned in ballet class. Step 1 is warm up. If you are a dancer, you don't just run out on stage and start dancing. You have to warm up, because if you don't warm up and get set up to do what you need to do, you risk a career-ending injury. Just like dancers, sales management there are things that management needs to have in place for their salespeople so that the salespeople don't hurt themselves and they don't hurt you and your bottom line. So what that means is, let's talk about a very clear definition of the target. I'm sure you've experienced this, Mike. I have clients that'll come to me. I'll say, okay, describe your ideal prospect. And they'll say, oh, any company that has 10 to 50,000 employees. And I'll say, you could narrow that down a little bit. Let's be very specific about who we're looking for, because you don't want your salespeople wasting their time. If it's an inbound lead, but it's an inappropriate lead, that's a complete waste of time. So define the target, define the message. Most salespeople create the problems they're having by what they're saying. So teach them what to say, and that's hard. We do it all day long. It's hard. Define the process. How many steps are there in your process of outreach to a likely target to get them to respond? And this is all the warm-up that needs to be done. Ballet dancers, we start at the bar and we do our plies, B-A-R-R-E. And that's how we warm up. We start at the bar, B-A-R-R-E. There are things you need to have in place for your salespeople so that they don't hurt themselves, they don't hurt you, they don't hurt your bottom line.
Wow, that's cool. I don't know if I hear people, thinking about that part of it as much as they really should. I think, especially in the smaller business, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think certainly in smaller businesses and smaller sales organizations, say, 5 or 6 or so salespeople or less, there's a tendency, because people are so strapped for time, there's a tendency to try to hire someone who already knows how to do everything, or at least they believe that, right?
Good luck with that.
Yeah. So they you've been a salesperson for a number of years before, so there's nothing I need to teach you. Just come in, there's your desk, and here's a little bit about the product, right? And then do whatever you do, and we'll check in on you down the road and see if you've been able to sell anything. And if you can't sell anything, it must have been you, so we need to get rid of you and find someone else who can do it, right? And it's short-sighted, and it's really, quite frankly, a waste of resources, because those people need more direction and they need more structure. It's not as there's an art and a science to selling, right? And there is an element of art, and I wouldn't argue with that. You need to be able to think quickly. You need to be able to to dance. I guess this is the theme of our call today, right? Someone's got to lead, someone's got to follow, right? And so, are you going to lead or are you going to follow in that dance, right? But you're not dancing alone. You're dancing with someone, which requires us to sort of respond and react to what the other person is doing. And there's only so much of that you can plan, right? So that's what I would call the art of a conversation. But certainly there's a science to it, right? There's a structure, there's a process, there's objectives, there's milestones. Milestones is probably the wrong word, but there are certainly objectives and key points that we want to try to communicate throughout that conversation that will move us hopefully to a more productive conversation down the road, either our next call or helping me achieve whatever my desired outcome is, whether that's a meeting or a quote or whatever my desired outcome is for that particular conversation. It's, I think sales managers or entrepreneurs at smaller organizations just expect a little bit too much from the sales team. They need more structure and more support than I think they get a lot of times. That's why I love what you do, because that's really where you come in, right? Hey, you don't have to figure all of this stuff out. Just bring me in and I will lay down a groundwork for you and help the team be prepared to do those things, right?
That's exactly what we do. And management does not have to micromanage because we do that. So I have a client that says that to me all the time. I don't have to micromanage because you do it.
So tell me about what that engagement looks like. When you say you micromanage on their behalf, like what are some of the things that you might be doing to help, that would fill in some cases what a sales manager might be doing in some organizations?
Well, let me go back to my 3-step model from ballet class, because we talked about step 1, which is the warm up. And, what I see a lot of companies, they hire a new salesperson and they essentially say, go sell something. Well, what we do is we help with those definitions that you need in the warm up. And then step 2, if you're a dancer, you don't just run out on stage and start dancing. You've been rehearsing for months. And Anna Pavlova was one of the great Russian ballerinas of the late 19th and early 20th century. She danced with the Imperial Russian Ballet Diaghilev. She was the first ballerina to tour the world with her own company. She very famously said, "No one arrives from talent alone. Work transforms talent into genius." Now, Anna Pavlova trained for 8 years at the Imperial Russian Ballet School before she ever joined the Imperial Russian Ballet. And had she not done that, she would never have done any of the things she did in her life. She learned her craft. So just like Anna Pavlova, just like every ballet dancer, your salespeople need to learn their craft, and it won't take them 8 years. They can learn to prospect. We teach people to prospect and set up qualified appointments so they can build a pipeline. We do that in a matter of 2, maybe 3 months. They can be efficient and effective at doing this. And but they need to learn their craft. They need to practice their craft. What do all great athletes do? Think about how many talented athletes are out there that have never made it to the Olympics or played pro sports. So your salespeople, your new hires, they need to learn their craft. And so step 1 is the warm up, the things that need to be in place, that clear definition of the target so they don't waste their time, clear definition of the message so they don't shoot themselves in the foot, and a clear definition of the process so that you can track it and benchmark it. Then they have to practice. Ballet dancers practice. We rehearse, warm up, rehearse. Then and only then is it time for your salespeople to perform. And the elephant in the room is call reluctance, right? You've probably heard your clients say that, Mike. It's like, oh, they won't pick up the phone. To me, that's a lot like stage fright. You're waiting in the wings. You're waiting for your cue. And your heart is pounding and your palms are sweaty. And then you hear your music and you get out on stage and you dance. Well, what enables you to do that? You've warmed up. You're prepared. You've rehearsed. You have muscle memory. It's automatic memory. That's what enables you to perform. So if you're hiring salespeople and you get them warmed up, you have everything in place for them so that they know what they're doing, and you've rehearsed, you've practiced with them, the call reluctance goes away. And that's what enables them to be effective. And so that's what we do in our programs. We warm them up, we rehearse with them, and then we keep them accountable to execution, to the performance.
That's awesome. I love that analogy. It's so deep and rich. It's fantastic. I love that. When you think about salespeople, the salespeople that you've seen be most successful over your career, the people that have either worked for you or that you've trained, um, is there a key attribute that you always feel like they have to have at least this one thing, and then I can work with everything else, but they got to have this one thing? Is there an attribute that you always sort of key in on, or is that not realistic?
Well, the attribute that I look for, and you can't tell it right off the bat, but is someone open to getting out of their comfort zone? Because, I mean, I know everyone knows the expression, the definition of insanity is you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. You know, every once in a while we have someone in one of our programs and like they just want to keep doing what they're doing, even though it's not working. And so having that ability, they may not know what to do. That's okay, because that's what we're here for. But just to be open to trying something, maybe it's a little uncomfortable, maybe you've never done it before, but you're just open to trying. Because someone that is open to trying can make great strides.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about, over the last 20 plus years that you've been helping companies like this, is there a story, an organization or a salesperson that comes to mind as being a transformation that you're just particularly proud of?
Oh man, there's a lot of them. We have someone who's in our program right now. He's a commercial insurance producer, and his father enrolled him in his father owns the agency. His father enrolled him, and he's a very, very nice guy. He's come such a long way. He had a lot of preconceived notions in his head about how difficult prospecting was, how everyone was going to hate him, all the terrible things that were going to happen if he picked up the phone to talk to a stranger. And it was really hard for him because he had a lot of, what do I do if they get mad at me? What do I do if they hang up on me? What do I do? But he was willing to try. He was willing to try. And he is about 4.5, maybe 5 months through a 6-month program. He's prospecting, I don't know, he's doing less than 100 dials every week and setting up 8 or 9 meetings for himself. And I'm just really proud of him because he was able to get out of his head. He was willing to try something new. He learned the skill set. He actually, it was hard for him, but I kept pushing him, and he took baby steps, but he got there, and I'm really proud of him. That's awesome. He's going to be really successful, because if you can set up a meeting, there's always somebody that can do the paperwork. But if you can get the business, then you're golden.
Yeah. There's tremendous value in it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just having the feeling empowered to be able to write your own ticket. Someone who's got these skills, well, quite frankly, they'll never go hungry, as you proved, in your career. I mean, you went from the stage to teaching, prospecting, because you know how to prospect. And if you can do this part of the process, if you can get the ball rolling, then a lot of times the solution or the product or the market or the other things can carry the ball, but you have to get it rolling, right? And that's really what prospecting does for organizations.
We have a lot of clients that will say, we're really good once we get in front of the prospect. Right. We just can't get in front of the prospect.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Right. Hey, I'm curious. So you're in New York City area. Is New York City the toughest place to prospect?
Well, it's funny because when I wrote Cold Calling for Women, Jeffrey Gitomer gave me a testimonial that essentially said, if you can cold call in New York City, you can cold call anywhere. And I don't know if it's the hardest city. This is where I grew up prospecting. I think there are certainly regional differences, and but not that much anymore. You know, I think that 20 years ago, I think the regional differences were a lot more pronounced than they are today, because I think technology has brought us all a lot closer together in certain ways.
Yeah, I think so. I think New York is still one of the tougher areas to try to penetrate. I think there's still it's still one of the markets that, or geographic markets at least, that can be a real challenge relative to maybe other parts of the U.S. I think, when I was thinking about that question, I was thinking, well, what do I think the answer is? And I don't know if it's the hardest. It's certainly challenging. In my space, I concentrate almost exclusively on technology and technology solutions. And so I find actually the Northern California, the Silicon Valley, the San Francisco area, the Bay Area to be really challenging, because everyone there is just convinced that they're the smartest person, already understands every technology available. So calling technology people to sell technology can be really tricky as well. You gotta stop talking about technology and start talking about business problems. But that's probably a good rule of thumb for everywhere.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll say about New Yorkers is we can be notoriously impatient.
Yeah.
And lots of times we have people come to our programs and they want to get on the phone with a prospect that they don't know and chat. And I think there might be parts of the country where that'll work, but don't do it in New York City.
Yeah.
Because we're going to go, what do you want?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, I think it is important to just be aware of some of those tendencies when you're prospecting. So if you're calling nationwide, and you might need to take a slightly different approach when you're calling into the South or Midwest versus calling on the coast. They're slightly different. They move at a slightly different pace, for better or for worse. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly a reality in a lot of places. So, but you're right. The world is moving. People are moving. People are more mobile than they've ever been before. You might call a company, and that's based in New York City, but the person you're talking to may be sitting in Iowa today. I mean,
absolutely.
It's just it's a slightly different world.
And you're calling them on their cell, and they've got a New York City area code, right, but they're in Iowa. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you change what you teach? We talked about this a little bit. You mentioned it before. I'm curious. So how do you change what you teach to a client when they're getting leads from the marketing team versus having to go find every opportunity themselves through cold calling or cold lists? How does that change for them?
Well, it depends on what kind of marketing lead it is. If it's a marketing lead where somebody has requested a meeting, that's a different marketing lead than somebody that has clicked on a link. And to me, there's not an enormous amount of difference between a cold call and somebody that's clicked on a link. You know that they probably have an interest in a particular topic, so you want to frame your introduction and your conversation around that topic and the business problems, like whatever the white paper, the product, whatever they've clicked on, because you're absolutely right. It's about the business problems that you can solve, not about what you do. Fundamental rule, nobody cares what you do. They care how they're going to be better off when you finish doing it. So what's the business problem? Frame the conversation around that. And you have an indication, because they've clicked on the link, that they might have an interest in this. But what you don't want to do is say, hey, I noticed you downloaded our white paper. Ready to give me your credit card? That's not going to happen. And unfortunately, I think that's the approach that a lot of salespeople take, because because they don't know any better sometimes. If somebody has requested a meeting and you're calling them up to schedule that, you still have to refresh their memory, because the research shows that people start to forget within minutes. So unless you're getting that lead immediately, and you call them the next day, they may have forgotten. So you have to frame your introduction around, again, the problem that's being solved, and you're going for setting up the meeting.
Yeah, you're always selling. You're
always selling. It's, before you get on the phone, this is part of the warm-up. When you hang up, what's your goal? What do you want to have accomplished? And then how are you going to get there? What do you need to be talking about to get there?
Right. I'm curious, what personal development disciplines do you follow in your day-to-day life that served you well? Is there something do you have any habits or rituals that really serve you?
You mean other than taking ballet classes?
You still take ballet?
I still take 4 or 5 times a week. I take a ballet class. All during COVID, I did virtual ballet classes. I actually built a dance floor, and I moved out all the furniture. I built a dance floor in my living room.
That's awesome.
And now the studios are open, so I go in studio. One of the things that I learned in ballet class, you don't get to be a ballet dancer by taking one class. You get to be a ballet dancer by taking class, and then you take class the next day, and then you take class the next day, and then you take class the next day, and so on. And if you do that over a period of years, you will end up being a ballet dancer. Talent is important, but it is not determinative. Taking class is determinative. And so when I look at my business, what I learned in ballet class is to keep putting one foot in front of the other, literally. But when I was prospecting every single day when I was doing business development for my clients. When I started my business, I was prospecting every single day. There are certain things that need to be done, or you don't have a business. And so what I learned in ballet class was to be able to put the blinders on, because there's always stuff. There's always stuff that's happening. But you have to say, okay, what do I need to do today to get to where I want to go? And when I was dancing, it was like, I have to go to class and I have to go to rehearsal. And then I have to show up at the theater at night. And for my business, what do I have to get done today that's going to move my business forward? And I do that every day.
That's great. So when as we kind of get close to wrapping up here, I'd love to give B2B company leaders something that they can really take away, some sort of takeaway action that they can implement, maybe even directly after listening to this podcast, 5 minutes later. So what's the most overlooked opportunity for most B2B organizations to grow right now? Is there a nugget of wisdom or something that you see consistently, like if they would just do this one thing slightly differently, or they would just do this one thing, it can make a big difference. There's a big payoff for it. Is there something that comes to mind?
Well, the thing that comes to mind is if you are not tracking what your people are doing, you need to start. Because if you're not tracking, you don't know what works. And you can't make it better because you don't know what they're doing right now. And if you are tracking, then and in terms of prospecting, the basic numbers that we track are there are 3 numbers: dials, meaning how many times did somebody dial the phone, conversations with decision makers, and then appointments scheduled. So those are the baseline numbers that we track, plus, returned phone calls, emails, all of that. But those 3 are just the baseline to track. If you're tracking those numbers, then you know how your people are doing. If you tweak your process or your scripts, does that make things better or not? And then if you hire someone new and you know what your numbers are, you can plug them into the system and make them successful too. So I would say, because I see that a lot, hire someone, go sell something, don't track anything. Let's cross our fingers and hope they work out.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And you're right. I think it's not done consistently enough or well enough. I think a lot of times, especially again, I keep talking of the smaller organizations because they tend to be the person leading this function probably got other things to do, right? They're also managing accounts or they're also managing operations or, right. So they're less of a, sort of single discipline role. And so a lot of times all they tend to do is manage the outcomes, right? It's just the outcome. Did we get meetings? Did we not get meetings? Did we sell something? Did we not sell something? And a lot of times the answer is in some of those earlier metrics. Are they doing enough activity? Are they making enough phone calls, sending enough emails? Are they having enough conversations? And what percentage of those conversations are turning into the positive outcome that you want? Without looking at that, at least those three elements, someone who's not setting meetings, you assume it's because they can't set meetings. No, maybe it's because they're not doing enough activity. And that's the missing link. But if you don't know that, and you can't set the right expectations around what needs to happen there, and you can't hold people accountable for doing it, then you might end up getting rid of someone who actually could be an asset to your organization just because you haven't done enough to set the right expectations and hold them accountable.
Absolutely. And as a coach, when I look at those three numbers, if I have someone in our program that is consistently making calls, they're dialing the phone, but they're not having conversations with decision makers, then I know I need to work with them some more on gatekeeper skills. I need to work with them on their voicemails. What are they saying? Can we get some of these people to return a phone call? What are they saying in an email? If they're having conversations, but they're not setting up appointments, then I know I have to work with them on what they're saying when they're talking to decision makers.
Right.
So it's such valuable information.
Absolutely. There's so much to this. We could talk all day about it. Obviously, this is something we're both passionate about. So it's a really fun conversation. As I mentioned to you when we met recently that I was following you 15 years ago whenever you were talking about some of the stuff. You were writing blogs and publishing articles. And so it's a pleasure to finally get to know you and you haven't disappointed. You're exactly what I thought you'd be, a real pro when it comes to this part of the process. And so it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. And so what is the best way for people to connect with you, Wendy, if they want to get in touch with you and they want your help?
Please visit us. Our website is gosalesology.com. We also have a gift for anybody that's listening, watching, 81 tools to build your sales and your business faster, more easily, and more profitably. We've had so many clients ask us about resources. We finally put it all together in a guide. So you can download that. You'll put this with all the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a link to that in our show notes. So you can find that at prosalesconnection.com. Look for our podcast and look for Wendy Weiss, and you'll see her notes there.
And one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm a phone person. You could call me. 866-220-4242. Give me a call.
It's as simple as that. Give us a call.
It's pretty damn easy. Give me a call.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Wendy. I appreciate it. Look, folks, if you like the conversation we had today, I'd be grateful if you could give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review on iTunes. Take just a few seconds to do that for us is such a huge help to help more people find us and help our ability to reach more and more people with some of this great insight. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, B2B leaders grow companies faster when they focus on the big three. Thanks. Have a great day.
Pro Sales Connection is a sales and marketing firm that has been helping B2B companies grow faster since 2009. Learn more about our proprietary fastest path to revenue process for B2B companies. Experiencing the possibilities begins with a short 15-minute call. Schedule yours at www.prosalesconnection.com and click Get Started.